Hi students, welcome to VerandaRace, and in today's session we are going to discuss the Hindu editorial of 24th March. So let us start the session. So the session started late today because of some technical issues. So let us start the session now. I think you are not able to see my face. No problem, you can just hear the voice and understand. That is good enough for me, for you all. So let us start the session. On Tuesday, after possibly the longest pause of 137 days, the topic is freeze out, which has been taken from the Hindu. Topic is freeze out. So on Tuesday, after possibly the longest pause of 137 days in India's retail fuel prices in recent years, oil marketing companies raised petrol and diesel prices by about 80 paise a litre, following up with a similar increase on Wednesday. So what does it mean now till now? Let us understand this. Today I'll be very slow in explaining you everything related to this passage. Okay. So on Tuesday, that's Tuesday, maybe yesterday, after possibly the longest pause of 137 days in India's retail fuel prices in recent years, oil marketing companies raised petrol and diesel prices by about 80 paise a litre, following up with similar increase on Wednesday. So 80 paise per litre price was increased on Tuesday. Similarly, there was an increase on Wednesday as well with a similar increase, that's 80 paise. A rupees 50 hike was also effected in domestic cooking gas prices. So what has happened is, after the longest pause of 137 days in India's retail fuel prices, the oil marketing companies have raised the price by 80 paise a litre, and again an 80 paise per litre on Wednesday, and rupees 50 hike was also effected in domestic cooking gas prices. Fuel prices were last tweaked in November 2021 following the Deepavali Eve cut in petrol and diesel excise duties. So what happened in November 2021? In November 2021, the petrol prices were last tweaked. So what's the meaning of tweaked? Tweak means to elongate or pull something very sharply. When we say, like, if we say fuel prices were last tweaked in November, it means they were elongated or pulled in November 2021 following the Deepavali Eve cut in petrol and diesel excise duties. There was a cut in Deepavali petrol and diesel excise duties in Deepavali last year to November 2021. The interregnum means the period when between two governments is known as interregnum. The period between two governments is known as interregnum. The interregnum between then and now, coinciding with the 5 assembly election battles, also witnessed the sharpest spike in global crude oil prices among recent instances of price freezes in India's deregulated petroleum product market. So the author says that India's petroleum product market is deregulated, means it's not controlled by anyone. Okay, so what he says is, last tweak in the fuel prices were in November 2021 when after Deepavali, of course, when there was a cut in petrol and diesel excise duties. So the period between the then and now, coinciding with the 5 assembly election battles, also witnessed the sharpest increase in global crude oil prices among recent instances of price freezes in India's deregulated, uncontrolled petroleum products market. So this was the sharpest spike in global crude oil prices among the recent instances of price freezes in India's uncontrolled deregulated petroleum products market. So from around $73 a barrel on November 4, so last year on November 4 it was $73 a barrel, crude prices are now around $110 $110 a barrel after shooting past $130 a barrel. Immediately after Russia's crude prices are now, immediately after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So what it says, on November 4 it was $73 a barrel. Now it is $110 a barrel after shooting past $130 a barrel immediately after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it has risen to $130 a barrel. Ordinarily, oil marketing companies reset retail prices daily. So what generally happens is oil marketing companies reset, means they set the retail prices daily based on an average of the previous 15 days global prices for their preferred basket of crude. So whatever they have in stock, whatever it means, basket of crude means whatever they have in stock. Whatever they have in stock, based on the average of 15 days global prices, they set the prices of the crude oil, right? The government has distanced itself from fuel pricing decisions, asserting there was no official directive to keep prices down. So the government of India has distanced itself from fuel pricing. It means fixing any price of the fuel, stating that there was no official directive to keep prices down. There is no official directive from the world, on a world level, how to keep the prices down. There is no evidence that oil firms had built up such large strategic reserves at earlier prices. So still the author says there is no evidence, there is no proof that oil firms had built up such large strategic reserves at earlier prices that they did not need to react to an over 50% cost surge for a commodity whose demand is met largely through imports. So what happens is, crude oil is a commodity, petroleum is a commodity whose demand is met largely through imports. Imports means importing in the country, not exporting. So there is no proof that oil firms had built up such large strategic reserves, means a reserve which is meant to be used when there is a demand or where there is a dearth of petroleum all across. So there is no evidence that oil firms in India of course, had built up such large strategic reserves. There is no proof of that at earlier prices, that they did not need to react to an over 50% cost surge for a commodity whose demand is met largely through imports. So there is no proof that the oil firms of India had already made a large strategic reserves at earlier prices, and that they did not need to react to an over 50% cost surge. Surge means increase for a commodity whose demand is met largely through imports. So a commodity, petroleum is a commodity whose demand is met through imports in India. It is not an indigenous, India is not an indigenous place for the production of petroleum. That price hikes in small doses have begun only after government formation in poll-bound states. Poll-bound states would mean those places where there was an election and their government was formed. Those places where there were elections and government formation took place, makes it abundantly clear that a nudge and wink from the majority owner of the state-run oil players had goaded them into swallowing higher costs. So what happened? The author says that those states in which there were elections took place, there it was very much clear that a disturbance from the majority owner of the state-run oil players. So there are some oil players in the state. There's somebody who is the majority owner of the state-run oil players, and they must have forced them into swallowing higher cost, compelling private players to follow suit to compete. So those who were the owners of the maximum number of oil depots or oil reserves, they forced the other private players to follow them to compete. They fixed the higher prices, price hike took place, and the other private players had to compete by keeping the higher prices as well. Holding free market prices hostages to electoral politics deployed over often in recent years, holding free market prices hostage to electoral politics. So, free market prices have become a hostage to electoral politics. Free market prices means there's no regulation, and their prices are hostage. Hostage means they have been abducted by electoral politics, hostage to electoral politics, deployed ever so often in recent years, including the last time these 5 states went to the polls and in 2019 Lok Sabha campaign, is politically unfair. So what does the author says? Holding free market prices hostage to electoral politics, including the last time these 5 states is politically unfair. So free market prices being controlled by electoral politics is totally unfair. Politically unfair is what the author says. Economically untenable and reflects an extremely cynical state machinery deployment tactic. Cynical means very critical, which should be criticized. Cynical state machinery deployment tactic. So what the author says? That the holding free market prices means unregulated market prices controlled by electoral politics is politically unfair, and it reflects an extremely critical state machinery of deployment tactic by the governments. It's a critical machinery deployment tactic. Machinery deployment means how to control the machinery of the entire state by the government, that is decided by the electoral politics, which is unfair, he says. That bulk diesel prices have been raised by 25 per litre to 122, means the price in the bulk diesel prices have been raised by 25 per litre, and now the prices are 122, indicates that several more hikes are in the offing. In the offing means are yet to come in the pipeline to close the gap between cost and pump prices. Cost involved and the pump prices means the prices at the petrol or diesel bunks. Okay, moving ahead. Inflation means rise in prices and cost, rise in demand, already above the comfort level. So the inflation is above the comfort level, and it may rise further. The government may intervene with more duty cost at the same point. So inflation, which is much above the comfort level for the people of India, it may rise further, and the government may intervene with more duty cuts at the same time. Well, I'm surprised, students, because somebody says that the author says that the inflation rate is very high. But why am I getting so many calls for loans? You must also be receiving many calls for loans. So when the inflation is high, now the inflation is around 5.93% in February. Just I was checking that. So if the inflation is high, it means there is more of a cash flow in the market. So why does the bank then decide to give loans? I'm surprised. When there is a low inflation rate, then the banks give a lot of loans at a lower interest rates. Well, let us not discuss that. That's not the topic of today. So inflation already above the comfort level may rise further, and the government may intervene with more duty cuts at some point. So there will be some duty cuts. Duties means excise duty, custom duty, and there will be some cuts in that. Cuts means taxation at some point. But there are larger red flags to fret about. Fret means to be tensed about. To be tensed about. Red flags means some more symbols of danger. No sane global investor. Sane means rational, logical. Global investor will bid for Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, for instance, if pricing freedom is effectively curtailed after an Election Commission of India briefing. So, Election Commission of India must have given a briefing, and in that, no global investor, no logical investor, no sane investor will bid for. Bid for means will auction for Bharat Petroleum, BPCL, if pricing freedom is effectively curtailed after an Election Commission of India briefing. This practice warrants wider consternation. Consternation means, so this practice means what? No global player is ready to accept BPCL as one of the biddings, means as one of the objects of auction. Objects of auction. Nobody is ready to accept it. So this practice warrants under consternation. Consternation means dismay or depression, dejection kind of thing. So this practice warrants wider consternation, wider dismay. Dismay means disappointment. So this practice which is no global player is ready to bid for BPCL. Warrants means threatens to give, threatens to have wider consternation, wider dismay, not only because it undermines a level playing electoral field in favor of the ruling dispensation, but also opens the door for much more such creeping diktats or deviations from policy positions for temporary gains in voter perceptions. Very simple line this is. So this kind of practice means increment in the price of petroleum products at a very higher rate, at a very high speed, warrants wider consternation, wider dismay, not only because it undermines a level playing electoral field. So electoral field should be level played. Level played means it should be balanced and it should not affect the petroleum prices, or it should be balanced. It should be under the provision of checks and balances. It should be balanced in every field. In the favor of ruling dispensation, it should not be in favor of the electoral field, means the people who are involved in the electorate should not be in favor of the ruling dispensation, the party that rules, but also opens the door for much such creeping diktats. Diktats mean activities or deviations from policy positions for temporary gains in voter perception. So fall in price is basically done to gain voter perceptions, but after the elections are over, the prices rise because the inflated kind of promises that were made by the politicians, that goes in vain. Just as mysterious fuel prices decisions have become par for the courts, just as mysterious fuel pricing decisions. So there have been some mysterious fuel price decisions. They have become par for the courts. Other transient departures from the stated policy can also become governance habits. So let us understand this. Just as mysterious fuel pricing decisions have become par for the courts. Par means on the same level, on the level. Okay. Just as mysterious fuel pricing decisions have become level for the courts, other transient departures from the stated policy can also become governance habits. Other transient means fleeting, means very short term. Short term departures from the stated policy means the policy which is already stated by the government can also become governance habits. So such certain kind of deviations from short term deviations from the stated policy can also become governance habits. While governments are obviously tempted to create optics of benevolence means show of generosity. So while governments are obviously tempted means attracted, lured to create optics of benevolence towards the common voter, the Election Commission of India needs to rise up to take up a firm stand on reversals or deferrals of routine decisions in poll season. So during the poll seasons, the Election Commission of India should rise up and take a firm stand on reversals or deferrals of routine decisions in a poll season. So whenever there is a poll season, it should take a firm stand and stand on the reversals or delays. Deferral means delays of routine decisions in the poll season. So whatever the decisions are taken in the poll season, if they are deferred, that should be taken care of by the Election Commission of India. Okay, students. So with this, I'd like to end the session. Thank you so much for being with me. Thanks a lot.